against the Islamic State terror army has jumped to a whole new battlefield. The United States now says it has begun launching airstrikes in Libya against the ISIS savages. The Obama administration reportedly rejected a full-on assault. The Pentagon is warning ISIS has expanded its grip on that North African nation, and some of the terrorists who were killed were reportedly planning attacks on Western targets. All that fueling the belief that Libya is emerging as now the fourth front in the fight against ISIS. On the list, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, as you see on the map there. Andrea, time and time again, we have talked about why Libya was fertile ground. Remind us.
Because Hillary Clinton said that we needed to oust Muammar Gaddafi. And Barack Obama supported her. And she takes credit for the whole thing in her book. And that created the vacuum that we saw and we see now ISIS fill. And they've been there for a long time. This isn't a new story. It just so happens that the New York Times decided to write about it, conveniently, that the administration's taking note. I wonder why they had that story. Anywho, this has been an issue for a long time. We've seen it. We've seen the stories. ISIS was attacking al-Nusra specifically, the British consulate. In 2012, we saw them attack our embassy. They've been there. They've gained ground. Now the story, I think, is that the Obama administration can no longer contain it. It's completely out of control.
Well, and what's interesting, too, about Libya, Bill, is that you see ISIS move in and they start to kill forces on the ground, forces, other militants, terrorists and killers and savages, who won't side with him, who won't pick up, as we saw Boko Haram do in other areas.
Islamic Jihad has been rampant in Libya for 20 years. They come from a town called Derna. It's in the eastern part of the country. They did a poll, or a survey rather, on the percentage of fighters who were coming into Afghanistan during the last decade. By far and away, in sheer numbers, of Saudi Arabia, but on a percentage basis, it was not the country of Libya, it was the town of Derna, Libya. We've known about this for a long, long time. If Democrats want to argue that you could not, or you failed in Iraq because you didn't understand the Sunni-Shia split, well, we failed in understanding the tribal factions within Libya and who they would align with if Gaddafi was not in power. I'll just add this. When the president was talking last week in Rancho Mirage in California, and he was talking about Libya, and what he said is true. It's a mess. There's no central government. There's no structure. It's tribal war. All that is true. But you knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, now, here's the difference. In this campaign, when Barack Obama says that, or Hillary Clinton makes that argument, Donald Trump is going to come on TV, and what's he going to say? Well, it's your fault. It's your problem. And these people in the Republican Party who are not on Trump's team right now, what happens when Trump takes his fire away from Rubio and away from Cruz and puts it all on Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama?
But she has
do
a
they
lot
come off the fence now? I say, for the sake of this argument, they do.
She has a lot to answer for Libya, and that's why Rand Paul, when he first started running for president, talked about Libya as though it's Hillary's war. And, you know, not being able to see tribalism in Africa is so short-sighted. And how is that going to spread to the rest of the continent where the political structures, or lack thereof, are essentially the same?
Libya is a disaster.
Well, you know why they can't speak up? Do you know why Marco Rubio can't do what Donald Trump is going to do and tie her to Libya, which he should, especially now with them planning attacks on the U.S.? Because he was for the nation-building ousting of Muammar Gaddafi. That is the Achilles heel of the establishment. You saw George Bush do it. Now you see Democrats doing it. He can't make a compelling case about ousting Gaddafi
because
he was behind it.
This is your expertise. There's one big fundamental difference between the operations ISIS has going on in Libya versus Syria, for example, because they're not controlling oil fields there that would then generate revenue for them and strengthen them.
That's an interesting point,
right? But we do know that they are trying to acquire some. They are trying to.
San Bernardino was tied to ISIS, right, by way of Saudi Arabia, by way of Pakistan. What happens if we get a terrorist hit that happens in the U.S. that's tied to Libya?
Yeah. Wow. What do you do?
You own that thing.
Don't want to ignore the news. So there is talk that Russia is on board with a ceasefire inside Syria. You've got another nesting ground for ISIS there. You know, Raqqa, their stronghold. It will be interesting to see what kind of deal making would happen.
That's from the UN?
Yeah.
Last Friday afternoon, I was at a Midtown restaurant, and in walked security, and there was Ban Ki-moon. 2 minutes later, in walked another group of security, and there was Samantha Power, the U.S. ambassador to the UN. They went downstairs for a private meeting. No one was talking, but in all likelihood, they may have been talking about that.
We will follow the news and report it as it happens.